Have you ever wondered how in the world you go about finding a good marriage and family therapist? What questions should you ask? Are there things you can do before getting professional help? What is the first session with a therapist really like? On today's episode, I tackle these questions and more as I sit down with Liz and pick her brain as a therapist. She offers some timely tips and helpful advice when it comes to deciding when and where to go to get professional help for your marriage. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. I'm Dr. Dave alongside Dr. Liz Hale. We are on a mission to bring you the very best we have in research and resources, along with some tips and tools to help you create the marriage of your dreams. Okay, friends, this is going to be an awesome. I'm really excited about this episode because we're turning the tables a little bit, and I'll be interviewing Dr. Liz Hale as not only just the co-host, but as a therapist, because we're going to be diving into, I think, one of the most common questions that couples have, and that is, how do you find a good marriage and family therapist? We've talked on the show, Liz, about, therapy can be helpful. It can actually be harmful. We'll dive into that a little bit. But how do you do it? So, Liz, let's start with this. I know this is your specialty, and you've been known to say that not every struggling marriage needs marriage therapy. What do you mean by that?
True. That's true. Well, let's look at it maybe a particular way with your health. You're concerned about your heart, maybe. Typically, you start with your primary care physician. I think you have to start there anyway to get to a specialist, but you typically, bottom line, you don't start with the cardiologist, right? It's a little bit too specialized, and there's just not enough of them to go around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're saying that, like, similar to a health concern regarding working on your marriage, you say there's good options before hiring a marriage and family therapist, right? What do you suggest kind of as the first stages before the cardiologist? Where do people go?
Sometimes you can turn to supportive family and friends, or even a pastor, or marriage mentors, or other couples who believe in marriage and understand what it's like to suffer and then succeed. People all around us have differing degrees of marriages, and they've been through different scenarios, and they really have come out on the other end, and they can live to tell about it, right? And really help us out. There are even good marriage educators and marriage coaches, and then finally, good marriage therapists. That's the order I would suggest for couples wanting to improve their marriage. And I trust a couple to know what's best for them, Dave. And on top of that, there's also great marriage seminars. Sometimes there's a weekend getaway. I think that's also a really noble option as well.
Yeah. So the solution shouldn't be universal for every struggle. Yeah. There's apps. We have resources on the strongermarriage.org website, articles and blog posts, this podcast, all kinds of other things for couples to explore and look at. Liz, one of our good friends we've had on a couple of times, Dr. Bill Doherty, has stated this. I think this is interesting. He says, couples counseling can be dangerous to your marriage. So according to a national survey, 80% of all private practice therapists in the United States say they specialize in marital therapy, but only 12% of them are in a profession that requires even one course on marriage therapy or any supervised experience. Liz, this shocks me. And I've seen other articles how marriage therapy can be harmful. So even our listeners hearing this can be discouraging. What do you say?
It can be discouraging. I mean, even just hearing you say that back, what Bill Doherty has said, Dave, I think, oh gosh, even though I've been highly trained, I've done it for 33 years, I think of the mistakes I've made along the way, right? I mean, this is just not going to be a perfect science, sadly, but we do the best we can. And I think training certainly gets us off starting on the right foot, both couple and therapist. It's the hardest form of therapy there is, couples therapy. And many of my colleagues wouldn't touch a couple, right, with a 10-foot pole. They just don't want that because it's so overwhelming to sit down. It's kind of 2 against 1, if you will. But most of us are inadequate because of inadequate training. Most marital problems are treated, sadly, for some reason, in individual psychotherapy. And that's because there's more individual therapists than there are marriage therapists. It's kind of like the practicing physician, right, versus a cardiologist. So why does damage often happen in individual therapy or in our social circles as we discuss marital problems with friends who are not interested in our marriage? too often the conclusion is that sometimes you'll hear this, right? Obviously, your marriage just isn't working anymore, Sally. Or it's time to move on, Sam. Or you deserve better. Or, well, let's just consider this your starter marriage, right? I think all of us have heard some form of those thoughts in our friendship circles or even just in social media. I believe that marriage therapy can be very helpful in the hands of therapists who are committed to the profession and the practice. But sadly, however, not every therapist who treats couples is trained to treat couples. That's just the bottom line. And that's why we're all a little concerned about it.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Liz, I get emails, I get texts, social media messages that say, "Hey, Dr. Dave, love your stuff, but man, I'm really struggling," or my sister, or my daughter is struggling in Draper, or in West Georgia, or in Bountiful, or St. George, wherever, and they say, "Do you know a good therapist? Can you recommend somebody?" So I think that they're trying to get a referral, I think, is first, but for the average couple, Liz, that has just they're struggling. They've been through some of the books and they're reading some things. They've hit the wall. What's the first step? Saying, okay, I feel like we do need to find a therapist. What do you recommend? Where do they search to find a good qualified marriage therapist?
Yeah. So it's finally time, right? The time has arrived where we really need to bring in the bigger guns, let's say. I think in addition to asking some close family members, friends, even physicians, pastors for their recommendations, I think there's some great online directories. And some of my favorites, the first one would be the Marriage Friendly Therapist. I love that
website. That's a website?
Yep, it's a website.
Okay.
The Gottman Referral Directory. All of us on there are in some level of the Gottman training. The American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. It's AAMFT. I love that group. Psychology Today is not a bad source either, as well as good therapy. So that's just a handful, Dave, of where you can go to start looking, and you trust your gut a little bit too. So much of the relationship in therapy, psychotherapy, marriage therapy is really about the personal connection with you and the therapist. Do you feel like they take sides, or do you feel they try to stay as neutral? Are they a fan to both of you? I remember Dr. Carly LeBaron said, I think you've had a good connection with a couple when they both felt like you were on their side, right? Both the husband and the wife felt like, oh, she liked me best, or I don't know how she said it, but I had to smile at that. That was a really good point.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we're going to put the links to these that you just mentioned, Liz, on our website for people to explore. And I'm curious then on these, I've been on a couple of these, and I see like ratings or reviews sometimes, or stars, or those types of ratings. I would assume, right, like anything on Amazon or anything else, paying attention to what others say. But you mentioned something, Liz, I want to talk briefly about, and that is the fit. Not only is it a good fit, like you feel like it's a good fit for you, but they feel like, okay, yeah, they have the expertise for your specific challenge, whether it's mental health or sexual intimacy, right? A sex therapist or whatever it is, making sure that fit aligns, I would say is really important, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very good point. And so, or maybe discernment counseling might be the best, right? If you've got one person leaning into the marriage, one person leaning out, marriage therapy is not always the ideal for that particular ambivalent couple. We've got other things that would be more useful.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so during this step, then couples, they may also want to explore how to pay for therapy. Especially, I remember as a young couple, it's expensive, and you're like, oh man, I'm not sure if we can pay for this. Is it worth it? And how much is per session? Wow, that's a really $200 or whatever, $400. This one's a really expensive. So it's worth noting. Correct me if I'm wrong. That the cost doesn't necessarily equal a better therapy. It doesn't always. You don't always get what you're paying for. Is that right? I mean, it can be expensive, and I get that. And I think big picture is worth the investment. Right, one of the greatest investments you'll ever make is in your marriage. So talk us through a little bit about the variety. What can couples expect with fees, that type of thing, paying for this?
And while therapy is expensive, it can help. You certainly save or repair your marriage, right? Which is less expensive than divorce. That's just so painful. Divorce is expensive across the board. But for additional cost-saving ideas, you can also check your insurance company. Many of us as marriage therapists are not on panels because an insurance company doesn't always pay for it. But I think sometimes therapists will make one of the partners the identified patient. I think there's a way around it. I believe it's ethical. I've just never done that myself. There's also employee assistance programs. There's health savings accounts. My couples love it when they can use their HSA cards. Some therapists even have sliding fee scales. And universities, Dave, like Utah State, they have couples therapy training programs that offer therapists in training with really good supervision at affordable rates. So I think there are ways around that. Sometimes pastors will pay for their couples to come in for several sessions. There's good support. Sometimes even parents might chip in. I think there's different ways. I just think it would be a shame to let money preclude you from getting good help. You can even talk to a therapist. I've had clients say to me, we just can't afford your rate, and I will work out a specialized rate for them. If I really feel that I'm the best for them or most qualified, feel like I could make a difference, then I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that's great, Liz. I think something you just said, it really resonated with me, and that is that this really don't let the cost of this deter you from, emotional pain and struggle and heartache. Hopefully that does not, and for some couples, their first thought is, it's too expensive. We can't go, we can't afford to pay for it. But hopefully that does not deter them in their search. Okay, so looking specifically, when they start their search, they're online, or they're looking through some of these sites for a qualified marriage therapist. What do they look for? How do they know the difference between this one and that one when they start saying some mumble jumble that I'm not even familiar with?
Yeah, boy, there's a few names out there, different therapists, right? Different titles, I should say. But you want to search for therapists with specialized training in couples therapy. So you make sure the type of therapies you see, like I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a marriage therapist. That's my specialty. There's professional counselor, there's social worker, pastoral counselor. Just make certain that they're licensed in your state and they've got the specific training and supervision in couples therapy approaches.
Okay, that's good.
You can ask them straight out, right?
Yeah, and do your homework online.
Yeah, pardon me. You can also call the licensing board, right, for your state.
Oh, yeah, right.
Licensing, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. I know you're also a fan, Liz, of additional training that marriage therapists can embrace post-school schooling. Some of these are, and you've made a list of some of these. I'd love kind of your thoughts on some of the Gottman method couples therapy. Can I just ask you why? People some people are Gottman, others are, what's a Gottman method couples therapy, and why should I look into that?
Mainly because it's scientifically based, right? We've got two scientifically based therapies as marriage therapists, and that's Dr. John Gottman and Dr. Sue Johnson. And so I am really a fan of marital therapists really getting extra training as they go. I just don't think we could ever stop learning as couples, as therapists, professionals. So I think the Gottman method, and I get several calls of people wanting a Gottman therapist. Couples are really savvy. They understand this training. They understand that John Gottman has predicted divorce with 94% accuracy rate. So they're very good consumers, and they're looking to start with someone who can really benefit them.
Mm-hmm. So that's one that it says, hey, Dave and Liz approved, and I think many others as well. There's another one, you hear it all the time, emotion focused therapy, or EFT. Tell us a little bit about that.
And that is Dr. Sue Johnson. So again, it's scientifically based. It's the MRI studies, which noted, if somebody was in an MRI machine and a light came up just before a shock, if they were holding the hand of a loved one, their partner, it really minimized the pain of that shock. If they were holding a hand of a stranger, it wasn't so helpful. They had a greater pain. So that's really where some of that started. But EFT, I think, is just great training. It's about attachment as well. I've heard about attachment from Bowlby, and now with today's marital therapy, they're looking at attachment between adults and in marriage.
Okay, that's good. So EFT, the emotional focused therapy, is another one. PACT, the psychobiological approach of couples therapy, is another one to be like, hey, they're had additional training in this. Tell us briefly about that one.
Yeah, just again, that's just it's a really excellent. It's an excellent training for marriage therapists. It can really help couples understand their individual approaches and the parts that belong to them specifically. I really liked PACT. It's very similar to integrative behavioral couples training. That's IBCT as well. And then, of course, the last one's one of my favorites also, discernment counseling, which is for those couples where they're not on the same page. One is leaning in and one is leaning out. And with discernment counseling, we get to the heart of, what part of this really belongs to you, whether you're leaning in or leaning out, and being able to have some individual time with the therapist, come back together, and we update the other partner on the individual time and what was said. It's being able to be really able to discern, like, can we wait, walk, or work on this? If we wait, I have had some couples decide to wait where it's like, I'm not ready to divorce, or we're not ready to stay married either and work on this. So they hit pause. Walk is where wait, walk, work. I don't know if Dr. Doherty would approve of me shortening it to these three things, but the walk is where, we simply can't make this work. And then the third phase, work, would be, I'm not sure I can make my marriage work, or he's not sure, she's not sure, but we're willing to give it 3 to 6 months of intensive therapy to see. So I love discernment counseling. Again, couples are really savvy on that as well. I get many calls on discernment counseling and the Gottman method, both.
Awesome. Yeah. And for our listeners, if you have not watched the episode with Dr. Bill Doherty talking about discernment counseling, well worth your time to check out that episode as well. And we'll put in the show notes these different types that may be unfamiliar. Again, things to kind of look for as you're exploring different therapists. Liz, you encourage couples to ask personal questions right up front about a therapist's training, even their value orientation. Here's a few of your questions you think couples could or even should ask. I'd love your thoughts on each of these. The first question, can you please describe your background and training in marital therapy? A fair question to ask, right? For someone who doesn't feel imposing or anything, an important question. Why?
It's a must. You're looking for a professional who has studied marital therapy in depth and is not solely self-taught or workshop trained.
Okay,
Most
good
important.
one.
Yeah.
Next question. What is your attitude towards saving a troubled marriage versus helping couples break up? Great question, Liz. Why? Why is that one important?
If a therapist says he or she is neutral or says, it's not my job to save marriages, then you want to look elsewhere. You're looking for a professional who is very pro-marriage, and he or she will be the last one standing in the room cheering for you and your marriage. They're not the first one to give up. They would be, after you've decided.
Yeah. Super important. Another one that you think is important for couples to ask is this one. Well, what is your approach when one partner is seriously considering ending the marriage and the other wants to save it? Great question. Why?
Again, that's for those ambivalent couples, or one is in, one is out. If the therapist responds by focusing only on helping each other clarify feelings and decisions versus assisting each partner to acknowledge individual responsibilities, you want to keep looking for a marriage therapist. Again, for that discernment counseling piece, it's really for what role did each of you play, even the one that is one of leaning out? What role did you play? How did we get here? Because, wherever I go, there I am. So I leave this marriage, Dave, and I'm going to go over and have this relationship. I'm going to hear the same darn things eventually from this partner, these complaints I heard from this partner over here. I'm going to hear the same things because wherever I go, there I am.
Yeah. Oh, super.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
I love this next one. What percentage of your practice is marital therapy? Great question, but explain why.
Well, if a therapist specializes mostly in individual therapy, and there's some tremendous individual therapists in our community, continue looking for a professional whose marital practice is significantly marital therapy. So you really want somebody who's in the trenches day in and day out. And the more they've seen, the more they can help you.
Yeah. Great. This last one, great question. Of the couples you treat, what percentage would you say work out enough of their problems to stay married with a reasonable amount of satisfaction with their relationship? Man, why? Love that question, Liz. Why should they ask that?
And like Bill Doherty said, you've got a therapist who says, 100% of my clients stay together and they're happy. Yeah. You'd probably be concerned. That's not quite right? Not every couple does decide to stay together, sadly. I don't know. And if they say the staying together is not a measure of success for them, I'd be concerned as well. So you certainly want somebody though who does have a pretty high success rate of couples working out their marriages. I wouldn't have a problem asking them that. I would say, many that are doing good marital work are 80% and above, where most of the couples stay together and thrive.
Okay. Yeah. That's good.
That's my experience.
Yeah. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Some couples, when deciding whether to work with me, even ask me about my own marriage, Dave, as well as my religion. Whatever is important to you as an individual, as a couple, you have every right to ask those key questions. And I think if you have a therapist who doesn't want to answer your question, and there will be therapists who won't, I think that's useful information for you as well. You get to determine if that is a deal breaker or not for you. I think I'm pretty open in my sessions. My favorite supervisors from my training have really been those that have been very honest and open about their own foibles and their downfalls and when things didn't go well and when things did go well. I learned the most from just that human connection. And I think it seems to be couples appreciate that in therapy as well, where I've really blown it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm learning right along with them.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just knowing that, each therapist is different, their own personality, and they're not perfect. And in some cases, they may be like, man, I'm not sure. Is that okay for a therapist to think, like, that's a really tough one. I'm not sure. Let me look into it and get back to you.
Yeah, let me give that some thought. Let me do a little deeper dive into that. You bet. It's a good thought.
Liz, I'm curious. Okay, I think a lot of our listeners thinking, hey, maybe we should give this a try. I know a little bit more. Let's find someone. They're asking the right questions, maybe on the phone or in person or online. Tell me, what can a couple expect for their first session? Realizing that every therapist maybe has different questions. Are there some common themes? I would think that some of the hesitancy is like, this is going to be weird. Do I lay down on a couch? Is this, they're going to analyze me? Are they going to be on her team? And if it's a female, and can you walk us through a little bit about the typical first session?
Yeah.
Is there such thing as a typical first session? I don't know.
You mentioned gender, and it's like, oh gosh, I feel that way sometimes. I'll often say to the husband in the room, it's like, I'm really sorry. You've got two women in the room. I cannot change my gender, and that feels probably like a bit of a bias, but I am really team couple. I'm team you, Jack and Jill. I'm on your side. And for the first session, I really love to hear a little bit about, just a small bit about their backgrounds. I'm kind of curious, the families they came from. Were their parents divorced? Did they have good marriages? What part of the country or the world were they from? How did they meet? What was their first impression of each other? What made them fall in love? What made them decide to get married or to live together as a couple? Whatever their circumstance might be. I'm interested in what they think, I often ask this question, and I've left this more lately, is what do you want to be sure, like I'll talk to you, the husband, Dave, I'll say, what do you want to make sure that your wife doesn't change? What do you love about what she's doing right now? And wife, same thing. What do you love about what Dave's doing? What do you want him not to change right now? Because usually we're so focused on what he needs to do different, how she needs to change. And then a favorite couple, or just a rather focus of the question is, what part does belong to you? And where we are today, the demise of this marriage, whatever it is, whatever level of happiness they're at, what belongs to you? And what do you feel responsible for? And what would you like to change? How would you like to show up differently? So we get a little bit of lay of the land, a little bit of goal setting. What do you want to have happen coming into therapy so I can make sure that you get what you came here for? So I'm really specific on that. Sometimes people really don't know what they want. They know that they're just tired of fighting, or they're just tired of not getting along and not having the marriage of their dreams. And that's okay too. Sometimes it's hard to articulate.
Yeah, I like that, Liz. I know some therapists will have, talk to the one partner, one spouse or wife or whatever it may be, and then for 15 minutes or something, and then okay, let's have you sit here, and I want to talk with your other partner. So alone, and then together. Is there?
That's discernment counseling mostly, right? I don't always do that, even in discernment counseling. Don't tell Dr. Doherty, because I think there's so many powerful things that I want the partner to hear about the other. They're really listening in when I'm visiting with their partner one-on-one. And so many times I have felt like, oh, I wish that partner were here to hear this, right? I wish they were not in the waiting room. I wish they were right here. So I think that can be so helpful. So many tender things are shared from the heart when you get into the depth of marital therapy. It's really very tender. I just can't think of a place I'd rather be than when someone trusts you with that level of intimacy. There's just nothing more precious to me or more meaningful.
Um, Liz, let me ask you, I'm going to ask you point blank. How do you feel about divorce? What are your thoughts, honestly, about divorce? Are you against divorce as a marriage therapist?
Divorce, unfortunately, is sometimes a necessity. And why do we avoid it if at all possible? Because it often leaves in its wake tremendous difficulty, tremendous pain, especially for children and even for the adults involved. It's not typically something that someone set out to do that, oh, if this doesn't work, we'll get divorced. Some people have that attitude, but not the majority. Divorce is a drastic measure for the most hopeless circumstances. So I don't think ethically I could ever say we should never have divorce. I don't feel that way. It is a necessity at times. What's interesting, David, and why I say that too, is you live long enough, right? You're seasoned enough, old enough that you get to see couples on the other end sometimes of that divorce where, anyway, it kind of makes me smile. I'm just thinking of one gentleman in particular who came back by himself after the divorce, and now he's married, newly married, but he just wanted to come in and work on a few things individually. But just to hear about that marriage and the contrast, the night and day experience between the marriage I saw in marriage therapy for a handful of sessions and now the marriage he describes today. I mean, it's just, gosh, maybe nothing is wasted. Everything teaches us. I guess that's how I feel about divorce too.
Yeah. Liz, I honestly couldn't agree more. I know people very close to me who have been through very painful divorces and it's spilled over, and children, it's difficult, very difficult. And they have found, new spouses and happy. Doesn't mean that there aren't struggles, but they are happier, better situation for that. So I agree. We do what we can, but sometimes it's in the.
That is the good news, is when there is that remarriage that really works. Because, I also want to make sure that we are really clear that those second marriages, third marriages have an even higher divorce rate, right, than the first marriages, especially because of blended families and those things are difficult. And it's probably why the majority of people who do divorce, this is also true, do regret that decision, because the grass is not always greener on the other side, right? The grass is greener where you tend to it and water it. So there's room for really both of those opinions, both of those outcomes, kind of the regret, but also when it's just inevitable that marriage is not going to work, then, choose well, choose better, maybe the second time around.
Yeah. And we have all kinds of resources on strongermarriage.org for singles, for couples, for those who have divorced, for those in remarriage and step families, whatever the situation you're in. There's help and there's hope and healing through the ups and the downs. Liz, I'm curious, any additional tips on marriage therapy you'd like our friends here at Stronger Marriage Connection to consider?
Yeah, I think what's often kind of the sad part about marriage therapy is if a couple doesn't give it enough time, right? One visit is not enough to determine how helpful a professional is going to be. It's important to be as direct and straightforward as possible about the outcome you're hoping to glean, the most for your investment in therapy. And that takes time, energy, and resource. I would love it if someone were to email me or call me and to say, gosh, I didn't feel like you were honest with me in that last session, or as direct as I wanted you to be. I would just be on cloud nine if individuals took that therapy super serious and would be straightforward and honest with me about how that went, what they'd like, what was not helpful, what was helpful. It really goes both ways. I will be as honest and open with you and hoping that you will be the same with me. So if you've been to a marriage therapist or even an individual therapist, give it another session or 2 or 3 to really determine that you can get everything you need from that individual and have the outcome that you're looking for. And if not, I would be happy to recommend a new marriage therapist, and most therapists feel that way. Let me help you find someone that will be a better fit for you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that on sessions. Is that a question even up front, Liz? I'm assuming it's fair to say, hey, how long do you typically, how long is a typical session, and how often, how long are you seeing couples for years, or do you typically 2 months, or is there a time frame? fair question for couples to
Yeah,
ask
that's a
about
good question. And it will be impossible for a therapist to determine that, right? I typically have short-term therapy. I don't really believe in couples coming in for a year or two. So I would say a handful of months is what I typically see couples at, but it, depends on the individuals that are in that therapy. Um, I think that because I do extended session, my hours, I see couples for 2, 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours. They're more intensive. We get somewhere faster. I think an hour session is a great way to feel like a bad therapist, in my opinion. You just really get started. So the majority of my couples love that option, especially when they take the time, they get the babysitter, right? And for the family member to watch kids, and then we can really do a deeper dive and be able to get somewhere for each time they come in. We can conclude in a way that makes them feel like, okay, we're in a pretty good place. Not always can that work, but for the most part, it does.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I can imagine, it's like 55 minutes and we're just getting going into a session and therapist is like, okay, well, we're gonna have to wrap things up, and that would be hard. So each therapist is different, and that's another great question I think to ask.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
Liz, I imagine we talked a little bit about fit earlier. So now kind of going through this process, you've been to maybe 2 or 3. So you kind of give them benefit of the doubt and kind of stick with it for a second to see if there is a fit, and maybe there is, maybe there isn't. What should couples know then?
Benefit of the doubt and really helpful feedback, right? Really honest feedback. It's got to have that. You have to have that mutual respectful working relationship. And some connections are easier to establish than others, right? Even in your own family, you have connections that are easier than other connections. But a genuine professional will not be offended if you decide you want a second opinion or you want to try working with someone else, and they'll help you find someone if you would like, or you can go back to the drawing board yourself and go it on your own. Again, there are some great resources for finding a good qualified marriage therapist.
Yeah, man, Liz, I think this has been so helpful. Thank you for allowing me to kind of pick your brain a little bit, as not just a co-host, but as a therapist, to really dive in and explore. We talked about important questions to ask, doing your research, what the first session is like, all kinds of helpful tips, I think, for individuals and couples who are looking for that. Now, at this point in the interview, Liz, right, as you know, we ask our guests the question, what do you believe is the key to a stronger marriage connection? I'm going to flat out ask you, what do you think it is?
I very easily, 2 things come to mind. I think it's about being kind and accountable. I think if 2 individuals they put their best foot forward and treating each other well, and they're accountable for the parts, the flaws and the weaknesses that they have, I just really can't go wrong when you're saying, oh, you know what, my bad, foul, I did that, dribbling, whatever it's called, on the basketball floor. Yeah, that was me. And it's just such a relief when you have a partner who says, oh yeah, my bad. I know I do that. And I really apologize for being so disrespectful when I, interrupted you in front of the party last night. Someone who can just be real and honest and accountable. Such a relief. It's like, oh, thank goodness he or she gets it, right? And I have to keep hitting them overhead. They understand the role that they play. And we're all imperfect, right? We're just these mere mortals. So kind and accountable. Dave, I'd love your thoughts as well. What do you believe is a key to a stronger marriage connection?
Liz, I want to echo what you're talking about. I might add that with the accountable and the forgiveness, underlying that as a virtue, I'm a big believer in that, and that's humility. To be accountable, I think takes humility. This you might be right, or I'm sorry that I've done this. This whole outward mindset that we've talked about, that I'm a big fan of. Kindness, absolutely. Compassion, my favorite word in the English language. Gratitude, doing these little things for that. Good friends, where we can talk, we can share. It's this awareness of you and your life, this absolute love that is really stems from all these roots that we've talked about. So yeah, kindness, I love it. Humility, accountability, forgiveness. There's so many. It's really hard to boil it down to one, isn't it? Because there's so much that really goes into it. Liz, I'm curious. I don't know if we've ever shared a little bit more about you, your practice. Where can people find you? And for those who may not be familiar, where are you located? And how can people look you up and get a hold of you?
So I'm downtown Salt Lake, South Temple and 700 East, and that's drlizhale.com. Probably the easiest place. Yeah. And I just do marriage therapy or relationship counseling. That is truly my passion. So I don't do really individual therapy. I refer those individuals on. And I've always felt like marriage therapy was the best self-improvement process. I think it really is a lot of individual improvement, individual insight. It goes a long way. So I look at it as kind of self-improvement together. And then, Dave, what about you? Where can listeners go to find out more about you and maybe this great thing you have is Meme Monday?
Yeah.
Yeah, and your new book. I think we need to tout your book.
Yeah. You can find me at drdaveshramm.com, drdaveshramm.com. I'm on social media. On Facebook, it's drdaveusu. Instagram, it's drdaveshramm. And it's been a fun project. My daughters and I, we just launched a book that I put all this positivity, information, stress, and it's called Journal Your College Journey. So it's a 2-year journal for college students, really kind of incoming freshmen. So a great graduation gift for students who will be going to college. And I've just crammed it with basically 2 decades of everything I know. I try to cram these little tips and information to help students be successful, especially that first couple of years of college. So
I love it.
Wow, Liz, it feels like it's just been jam-packed session with all kinds of great tips. Thank you, Liz. Thanks for opening up, for sharing a little bit about important questions, things that couples can ask, and what couples can do even before therapy. I think there's a lot of great resources, and we'll put those in our show notes, including strongermarriage.org. If you've not been to visit all the amazing resources there, we're in the process of developing dozens and dozens of free for Utahns e-courses on all kinds of topics. And so we hope you'll visit that. Okay, friends, I think it's that time. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of Stronger Marriage Connection. We'll see you next time.
And remember, it's the small and simple changes that create a stronger marriage connection. Bye-bye now.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.